We'd like to thank everybody for being here, and this is big for us. The Find Your Grind Live thing, we're trying to grow and extend, and our first guest today is a family friend of mine for a long time, and he served on the Australian Defence Force in Iraq, and he is the founder of the International Anti-Poaching Foundation living in Zimbabwe. I want you all to make some noise for my good friend Damien Mander. So Damien right now is out here in the U.S. He is on a Nat Geo tour where he has been speaking. He spoke in Calgary, he spoke in Phoenix, and he is getting the word out there. He just got done shooting with James Cameron for Game Changers, and he is somebody that is changing the world and something that means a lot to us here at Find Your Grind. And I'm going to pass it over to Nick, and we're going to get started. We have one microphone. This is horrible, but we have one mic.
So my thing is, just briefly meeting you right now, man. As a Australian war vet, how did you end up in Africa?
Yeah, thanks, and g'day everyone. I suppose for a lot of us that go over to war, fighting the arguments of old men, and I don't want to take anything away from the real victims of the Iraq war, and that's the Iraqi people, but for a lot of us that go over and fight in those situations, the real war doesn't start until the bullets stop, and you're trying to figure out how to reintegrate back into society and what to do next. And when you leave these units where everyone around you cares about your life more than you care about it yourself, and you've got this brotherhood, and you've got what I'll say is the most elusive thing in life, and that's purpose. And then all of a sudden it stops, and you're trying to figure out the what next. I ended up in South America after 3 years in Iraq, a lot of drugs, a lot of alcohol, rapid downward spiral. I'd heard about anti-poaching a decade earlier, and it just sounded like, at the time, just an adventure. And I didn't join the military to serve my country. I did it as an adventure. I didn't go to Iraq to help the situation. I went there to make money. And coming to Africa, I went looking for a fight, not a cause. But that plan got destroyed pretty quickly. So with the drive to start this organisation, I say we're 10 years old now. We've got Jane Goodall as the head of our advisory board. We own and manage over 1 million acres of land. We've trained rangers that currently protect 10 million acres across southern and East Africa. So we're scaling as an organisation. I wanted to start this because I saw rangers doing the toughest job on the planet, out there defending the natural world with their own lives for a minimal salary, away from their families for up to 11 months of the year. I just come from Iraq. We were looking after fucking resources in the ground and dotted lines on a map. And we had anything we wanted. I saw these rangers that were struggling, and they're fighting a real war, a war worth fighting. And alongside that was animals. Guys, it was animals. Animals don't want a car, a paycheck, bigger house, fancy suit. Animals want one thing, and they want to live. And we as a species, we continually take that away from them. So I had two things in this world. One was a shitload of money. Australia's one of the highest paid militaries in the world, and I was making $250,000 a year in Iraq as a private contractor. I bought a property portfolio in Australia at the bottom of the property boom. And the other thing I had was a shitty set of skills, which unfortunately is required today to look after the natural world, but that's the world we've created for ourselves to manage. So I just saw a problem. I wanted to be a part of the solution. A daily basis. So we started going out there as an organisation, just trying to find your space and find your dance space and figure out where it is and what's a pretty pointy-elbowed industry. And we started off as a service provider, doing training for other organisations, other rangers. And then about 2 years ago, we started buying out trophy hunting companies. So these are companies that own massive tracts of land, areas that have equal biodiversity importance to national parks, but trophy hunting is a dying industry. That's where people will come across and shoot these animals and hang them above the fireplace. So we started buying out these companies, and instead of training men, as we've done as I've done for 2 decades, I've built a career across 3 continents in bringing hard men to the point of breaking and then rebuilding them into what we need on the front lines. And women never featured in that equation. But 2 years ago, we wanted to change that and do a trial with women in a world where empowering women is the single greatest force for positive change today. Coming from a world where women were not welcome, special operations is the ultimate boys club. And we started doing this trial with what's now become the only network of nature reserves in the world to be completely managed and protected by women. But the whole business model, it's flipped conservation on its head. We put women's empowerment at the center of the conservation strategy. It gives us the greatest traction in community development, and conservation became a byproduct. Akashinga is a name that the women came up with for themselves, and it translates in local Shona dialect to the brave ones. And the reason they've given themselves this name is all the women that we employ and empower, they're all survivors of serious sexual assault, domestic violence, AIDS orphans, single mothers or abandoned wives. So we've got, on this program, we've got a staff of 160, and we're in the process of training another 160. We've got 1 million acres at the moment. We've got another 600,000 acres coming on board. That's 8 parks to ourselves. Our goal is by 2020 that we have bought out 20 parks across the continent that were previously reserved for trophy hunting. We've bought them out, and we are employing and empowering 1,000 women to protect those areas. And he'll have what will be the largest all-female army in the world, protecting some of Africa's most iconic ecosystems and absolutely kicking ass at it in a male-dominated industry. And it's shifting the whole paradigm on how we look at law enforcement, community development, and conservation across the continent. Look, mate, so when the initial recruitment, we had 87 women come down, and 87 women. I sit there and listen to the stories of these 87 women. I've listened to and seen some shit in my time, and the stories that these women had were the toughest that I've ever heard, and it made me realise these women weren't victims of circumstance. They were all victims of men, unfortunately, in a very patriarchal society. And when we put them through selection, military selection, it's designed to make you fail. It's a process that's been refined in some cases over hundreds or thousands of years, and it exposes you to the 4 pillars of misery: to be hungry, cold, tired, and wet. And when we put these women through this, because you learn the most about someone when they don't think they're being watched. And we don't want great CVs or qualifications. I want scrappers. I want spirit and character. We can train the rest. And when we put these women through the training program, they had all of that in spades. It made me realise that what we're putting these women through was nothing compared to what they came from, and nothing compared to what they stood to go back to. So they're tough, mate. They're bloody tough. They're fantastic rangers. They naturally de-escalate tension. Very little sense of entitlement, very little ego, zero corruption, and fantastic communications with local communities. Yeah, so we're touring with National Geographic Live. So the Speakers Bureau has got about 50 speakers that tour the world, speaking to some pretty awesome size audiences. We got 3 nights booked in Seattle, 2,500 people a night. Just getting the message out there about this program, about conservation in Africa, just about looking, we've been given one backyard, which is the natural world, and as a species, we're one of millions of different species, but we're the only one that can determine what level of suffering and destruction is acceptable for all other species out there. And this one backyard that we've been so fucking lucky to get, we're destroying it. So being able to get out there, and particularly speaking to people your age about the future and about looking after this natural world, it means a lot to me. I have to go and sit in and talk to people about money and shit like that. I'd much rather be talking to you guys.
That was actually going to be one of my questions. How hard is it running a non-profit business?
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult, hey? I used to be the guy when I walked into the pub, I was the first one up to buy everyone a beer, and now it's like I've got to walk around asking people for money. But I've actually, I sold everything I had. I sold 100% of what I had. There was 5 houses in Australia, 2 apartments in Dubai, and just this year started personally getting back in front through speaking fees. So this year I've been able to donate almost $100,000 back into the organisation personally. But it's just growing it. Hey, we're 10 years old as an organisation. I'm about to turn 40 as an individual. I've got another 40 years of doing this. So it's exciting to watch where we are, where we've come from, and where we're going, and not only where we're going, but why we need to be there.
Where do you guys want to go? What is the future?
2025, we want to have that army of 1,000 women, 20 reserves, But not only what's under our portfolio, but the example we can set across the continent, across the world. Putting women at the center of the conservation strategy is a simple yet innovative solution that I think will shift the way we look at conservation, philanthropy, and development across the entire continent. And for so many years we've been blinded by our pride from seeing the most powerful force in nature, and that's a woman's instinct to protect. And these women out there doing one of the toughest jobs on the planet in one of the harshest, most remote locations, and they're fucking kicking ass at it.
So awesome. A couple other questions, and I wanted to just veer off a little bit from the ranger side, and I wanted to just talk about like wildlife in Africa, and I know that's like been a huge part of it, and with the rhinos and everything going on, you hunt poachers directly, right?
Well, when we came over and my background was Navy clearance diver, which is Australia's version of the SEALs, and then after September 11, our government formed what they termed the first and last resort for a terrorist attack, and that was a small special operations unit called Tactical Assault Group East. These were the skills that I brought to conservation when I first started, and it was a very militarized approach. Women have very much shifted that. My background is counterinsurgency warfare, and if you look at those words, counterinsurgency, we're looking to counterinsurgency. We want to start a fight and we want to finish it. Women are a little bit different. They seem to want to understand a problem or talk to it before they shoot it or blow it up. And when you're trying to have a relationship with the local community next door to an area you're protecting, if you're having these interpersonal relationships as opposed to a war, it makes the job so much easier. And the women have now made 125 arrests in this particular pilot program, and they've done all of that without a single shot being fired.
Why do you think why do they hold back?
It's just a different value system, a different way to look at problems, different approach. Whether it's better or worse, it may not be suitable across every spectrum, but I can tell you for what we're doing, and after 2 decades of law enforcement and conflict resolution, I'd much rather have de-escalation and have conversations and relationships as opposed to an ongoing war. And look, we're not necessarily a women's empowerment organisation. We just found a better way to do business. We cut our core operating costs by 2/3 because women not wanting to have this war, rather have this relationship. We don't have helicopters, we don't have airplanes, canine attack teams, drones, bigger fences and more guns. We have more people having more relationships with the communities they grew up in and the communities their children are going to be raised in.
That's amazing. And I think, we applaud you, and it's been cool because I don't know if you notice it, but you're on the Jeffrey Show, you're on Comedy Central, you're on 60 Minutes, you're kind of splattered about television here in America now, which is kind of cool. And I don't even know if you actually realize that. And it's been cool to see people like Leonardo DiCaprio and James Cameron, these people get behind you. On a level of people getting behind that, what's something advice or some people you could give that the message that you want people to be able to take away?
Yeah, I mean, there was a quote made by a forestry officer in 1968, a guy called Baba Diom. He said, "In the end, we will conserve only what we love, we will love only what we understand, and we will understand only what we are taught." And I think until we go out there and make ourselves aware about what's going on in the world, we're part of the problem as opposed to being part of the solution. And it's not just about what organisations you can support, but how we can play a role in our everyday life in looking after the natural world. It wasn't our parents' responsibility. It's not going to be our children's responsibility. It's all of our responsibility. And we got one backyard, and it deserves to be looked after.
I like that. One last question. What does the future of wildlife look like in Africa?
Mate, I've had a couple of years of this fatalist mindset. I'm optimistic, because I'm seeing it. The area these women went into, the Lower Zambezi ecosystem, it had lost 8,000 elephants in the 16 years prior to our arrival. In the 2 years since we've been there, there's been an 80% reduction in elephant poaching.
Wow. That's it. Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together for Damien Mander.